Hello, I'm Dr. Marion Long and I'm the founder of the Rhythm for Reading Intervention Programme. So today I want to ask this question: what can we do to support the development of reading fluency? All children from all backgrounds need to learn to read fluently so that they can enjoy learning and fully embrace the curriculum offered by their school. A key challenge for schools is identifying an appropriate intervention that effectively supports reading fluency, which is a necessary part of a coherently planned, ambitious, and inclusive curriculum that should meet the needs of all children. The children who lag behind their classmates in terms of fluency are not a homogeneous group. Although time-consuming and costly, one-on-one teaching is essential for those who struggle the most. However, in my doctoral research, I showed that short, intensive bursts of rhythm-based activity give a significant boost in reading fluency in the context of a small group intervention. I found that an evidence-based rigorous approach to teaching and assessing reading fluency leads to increases in children's confidence and enjoyment in their reading. It's quite logical to assume that the difficulty level of the child's book is the barrier to the development of reading fluency, but finding an easier text doesn't really address the underlying issue. Reading fluency involves not only letter-to-sound correspondence, but also a willingness to engage with the print as a form of social exchange, and this involves the orchestration of several main brain networks. These social elements of reading become audible when the expressive and prosodic qualities in the child's voice start to appear. This is why a more holistic, child-centered perspective is really helpful. It allows children to experience learning to read as a wonderful and playful process rather than a pressurized one. The pressure felt by children with poor reading fluency arises because of their inattention and distractibility, as well as variability in their alertness, which pull them off task. Compared with their classmates, these children are either more turbulent in social situations or quieter and more reserved. Our rhythm-based approach uses small group teaching to attune and support these children into a more regulated state. Working with the children in this way helps them to adapt to the activities, to adjust their state, and to regulate their attention within a highly structured social situation. So, what are the key components of reading fluency? Different frameworks describe fluency in different ways. From a rhythm-based perspective, the components of expression, flow, and understanding are the most important. And there is one more to consider: social engagement with the author, the person who wrote the printed words. The extent to which the child reads with expression, flow, and understanding reflects the degree of social engagement whilst reading. One of the ways to accomplish this level of social engagement is to free the volume and the range of the voice by encouraging a deeper involvement with the text. It's easy to achieve this in books that invite readers to exaggerate the enunciation or expressive or onomatopoeic words. The flowing quality of fluent reading shows that the child has aligned the printed words on the page with a feel for the underlying grammatical structure of the sentences. This sounds more complicated than it actually is, and it doesn't need to be taught, because children activate these structures in the first 8 months of life when they are acquiring their home language. Accessing these deep structures during reading enables the child to feel the natural rhythm in the ebb and flow of the language. However, there are many different styles of both spoken and printed language, and each of them may have a slightly different rhythmic feel. Feeling the rhythmic qualities of printed language is inherently rewarding and motivating for both adults and children. It allows the mind to drop into a deeper level of engagement and to achieve an optimal and self-sustaining flow state. Let's now consider understanding in reading fluency. Understanding printed language requires motivation to engage. Let's call this the why. It involves a degree of familiarity with the context and a basic knowledge of vocabulary, which are both necessary to stimulate the involvement of long-term memory, as well as a desire to become involved in the narrative. Many books introduce us to new concepts, vocabulary, and contexts, but the why must act as a bridge between what is already known and the as yet unknown, and this why compels us to read on. In a conversation, there is a natural alignment between expression and flow and understanding. The energy in the speaker's voice may signal a wide range of expressive qualities and emotions, which help the listener to understand the why behind the narrative, as well as keeping them engaged and encouraging reciprocation. To an extent, the why is arguably the most important element in communication, as it conveys the person's attitude and their intention in sharing important information about challenges, changes in events, and the experience of individual characters or people. These are all staple features of many storylines and plots. So in Eileen Brown's beautiful telling of Handa's Surprise, which is a humorous book about a child's journey to her best friend's village, the reader learns about the names of the fruits in her basket, the animals she encounters, and also becomes curious to learn what happens to Handa as she walks alone in southwestern Kenya. It isn't actually necessary for young children to know the names of the fruits such as guava and tangerine or passion fruit. Despite the irregularities of words such as fruit and guava and the need to segment tangerine with care to avoid the syllable tang, children understand the story, having been introduced to the new unknown vocabulary in the known context of fruit. The child's long-term memory offers up a background knowledge of fruit. And this is a broad category, but the child can then add the names of the new fruits under the categories of food-related or fruit for use in future situations in their own life. The new vocabulary in the story enriches children's knowledge of fruit. But the why of this tale is the bigger question. Will Handa complete her journey safely? Empathy for and identification with Handa elicits subconsciously an increase in the reader's curiosity and brings further focus to the mechanisms of reading fluency. Once each new word has been assimilated into the category of fruit, reading fluency is self-sustaining and driven by plot development and empathy for the main character. Having read this story with children, I have become aware that reading fluency must become closely aligned with the rule-based patterns of grammar, as these enable orthographically irregular words such as fruit and guava to be quickly assimilated into the flow of the story. A more famous and exaggerated example of this effect is Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky. Many of the novel words invented by Carroll for this poem must be assimilated into the reader's vocabulary. The process is much the same for made up as it is for unfamiliar words. Long-term memory offers up categories of animals and their behaviour. This process is relative to the evocative sounds of the words such as slithy, frumious, and frabjous. The grammatical structure of each line of the verse is kept relatively simple, allowing the narrative to feel clearly supported by the regular meter. The repetitive feel of the A-B rhyme structure guides the reader to use the conventions of grammar in anticipating and thus engaging with the unfolding yet somewhat opaque narrative. Together, the features of repetition, rhythm and predictability strengthen coherence, so that the words are chunked together in patterns based on the statistically learned probabilities of spoken language. Deeper grammatical structures that sit beneath these rhythmic patterns are logic-based, and they offer up meaning and interpretation based on micro cues of nuanced emphasis, intensity, and duration within the fluent stream of language, whether that's spoken or read. So why is reading fluency important? Basically, reading fluency is important for 3 reasons, and these reasons also act as the drivers of motivation and learning. Reading fluency brings the rhythmic patterns of language into alignment with deeper grammatical structures that are necessary for meaning making. That's the first reason. The second reason is that these structures, which are probabilistic, bring into awareness the most likely next words and phrases and developments of the story. These are not based on pure guesswork, but reflect the reader's understanding of the genre, the context, and the text-specific cues. They include appraising the shape of the word and also automaticity in the correspondence between the shapes of letters, also known as graphemes, and the sounds, also known as phonemes. These cues are necessary, but not sufficient to orchestrate reading fluency. Thirdly, and lastly, reading fluency supports children as they expand their vocabulary in the ways that we've discussed. The majority of research studies show that a strong relationship exists between vocabulary size and social background. Up to 90% of vocabulary is not encountered in everyday speech, but in reading. Vocabulary is particularly important for text comprehension, and children's books tend to include more unfamiliar words than are found in day-to-day speech. So the first 2 processes that involve rhythm and grammar work together symbiotically to create expectancy in the child's attention. And this feeling of expectancy allows the child to anticipate, to adapt, and to adjust to what is coming up next in printed language on the page. And this also happens actually when we hear someone speaking. The third process, which expands the child's vocabulary through encounters in books, changes the child's perspective on life. Teachers and parents need to expose children to printed language, including the unfamiliar and the orthographically irregular words. It is through reading fluency that these words are assimilated into a child's vocabulary. So, how might we measure reading fluency? Listening is key to measuring reading fluency. If a child practices a sentence by repeating it at least 3 times, there should be a natural shift in the level of engagement. So here's an example of the process of refinement through repetition. And I'm just here going to sort of speak to the process that I hear children go through when they're reading slightly irregular words. A beard hoped up to my window. A b d h o p p ed up to my window. A b ear d b bird hopped up to my window. A bird hopped up to my window. The pivotal moment was when bird became bird. This would have sounded louder because the child's voice would become clearer once the known category of bird was activated in their long-term memory of words, the lexicon, and the meaning behind the word automatically became engaged. Long-term memory offered up the strong likelihood of hopped rather than hoped in relation to the category of bird. And this helped the child to extrapolate that the final word must be a thing to hop towards. This was not guesswork, nor was it an exclusive reliance upon phoneme-grapheme correspondence, but an alignment of long-term memory, including probabilistic language processing, with visual recognition of letters and knowledge of the sounds they represent, including a degree of automaticity. Reading fluency can be measured in terms of engagement, expression, flow, and understanding. And in the Rhythm for Reading program, we specialize in transforming children's reading at this deep subconscious level. Children move from relying on unreliable decoding strategies because the English language doesn't follow the regularities of letter to sound correspondence. And we help them to full alignment with the language structures that underpin their everyday speech. Once this shift has taken place, the children are able to enjoy interacting with books, and they also grow in confidence in other areas of learning and social engagement. We have helped many hundreds of children to engage with reading in this natural, fluent way using our rhythm-based approach, and it is delivered in only 10 weekly sessions of 10 minutes. I hope you enjoyed hearing all about this process.